Hello, we are live, and welcome to chapter 23. We're in the home stretch. Only got a couple more chapters left. There's 26 chapters total in this compendium. And so it goes all the way back to 1492, all the way till today. It's divided into eras, and each era is divided into chapters. So we've covered chapter 1 all the way through to what we're going to be talking about today, which is chapter 23, the final chapter of the Cold War era. In this chapter, we'll cover the presidential administrations of Carter and Reagan from 1977 until 1989. In this chapter, and what I'm showing you is our website. And our website is www.tarpeia.us. Tarpeia is spelled Tarpeia.us, and this is chapter 23. This chapter is divided into sections, and each section has its own interactive timeline, like what I'm showing you here. So this is a timeline of the Carter administration. I got a bunch of primary source documents and events on the timeline that I'm going to be going through. And then the next section is going to cover the Reagan administration, both terms. And so I got a bunch of documents for that as well. Now, this is still a work in progress. And so if there's any documents, any events, any primary source documents that you can find for this chapter or any chapter that you do not see on the compendium, please let me know, send me a link to the full text of the document, and I'll be more than happy to add it to the timeline, to the compendium. So, let's get into this section. The first section of this chapter is called Peaches and Cream, which is a reference to Carter, Peaches, Georgia, and Cream, Mondale from, I think, Minnesota. And so, that's why Peaches and Cream, and also not just peanuts, were, I'm not sure if they're called slogans or just, I guess, things that people said during the Carter administration. So let's get into this section. You have Jimmy Carter's presidential presidency was defined by moral idealism colliding with geopolitical and domestic instability at home and abroad. Carter's emphasized human rights and diplomacy, brokering the Camp David Accords, yet continued U.S. support for the Iranian monarch, the Shah of Iran, contributed to the 1979 Iranian Revolution and the ensuing hostage crisis, which paralyzed his final year in office and culminated in the failed rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, at home. At home, the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident and persistent energy shortages underscored economic anxiety, while Carter's crisis of confidence speech captured a nation unsettled by inflation, stagnation, and declining trust. Abroad, the Sino-Soviet split reshaped Cold War alignments, even as the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan shattered détente, prompting Carter to impose sanctions, boycott the Moscow Olympics, and redefine American strategy on the eve of a conservative turn. So go to the first document that we have, which is Carter's January 20th, 1977 inaugural address, which you can watch directly from our timeline. We have the videos of all the inaugural addresses. If there is a video of one, we have it on the timeline, so you can watch it. See, one of the first addresses that Carter gives is to the OAS. The OAS is the Organization of American States. It's like NATO, but for the Americas, and doesn't really have much to do since the Americas isn't really at war with any countries, unlike NATO, when you have this neighboring countries fighting each other, like Russia and Ukraine. We have Carter's first address to the nation on energy. This is not his famous uh, address where he, I think this is not his famous one, where he talks about putting on a coat in the house instead of using your heater. So you have Carter's address at Notre Dame commencement. So we add a bunch of speeches from the president as well. You have his second address to the nation on energy. I think this is the one where he says to put on a sweater. Carter will toast the Shah of Iran. So he toasts the Shah of Iran at the White House dinner, saying we look upon Iran's strength as an extension of our own strength, and Iran looks upon our strength as an extension of theirs. Earlier that day, protesters and police clashed, leaving over 100 injured. Carter's support of Iran will haunt his presidency and will have major consequences for American involvement in the Middle East. You have the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, passed as a complement reform to the TWEA and the NEA framework. The IEEPA authorizes the president, once a national emergency is declared, to regulate or prohibit international economic transactions, including trade, finance, and property transactions, giving the executive broad economic security powers in peacetime or a crisis globally. In practice, the IEEPA has become one of the most commonly invoked statutes for sanctions, export controls, and other economic tools used in response to foreign policy or national security threats. You have Jimmy Carter's infamous Island of Stability speech, which he gave at his state dinner in Tehran, Iran. Carter continues to show support for the Shah of Iran, this guy right here. And yeah, the Shah was not a nice person. He abused his own people, and we supported him. And you'll see why that was a bad idea. We have Carter's 1978 State of the Union address that you can watch. We have Regents of the University of California versus Bake. This is a Mr. Beat video that you can watch. This is another Mr. Beat video, the FCC versus Pacifica Foundation, about free speech. You have the Camp David Accords, which were agreed to in this conference in September of 1978. While these accords are going on, you have an infamous Jala Square Black Friday massacre, where about 100 people are killed in Iran protesting the Shah. And of course, Carter calls the Shah and reassures U.S. support. You have the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, enacted in response to the Watergate scandal when the Church Committee exposed widespread warrantless domestic surveillance. The U.S. government has a long history of warrantless surveillance, but following the Watergate scandal, regulations were made to prevent such actions. The law created a legal framework for foreign intelligence collection while protecting civil liberties by establishing the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, FISCO, or FISC, to approve surveillance targeting foreign powers or their agents. FISA marked a major shift from unchecked executive surveillance to judicial oversight and congressional accountability in U.S. intelligence operations. Let's see, we have Vietnam invades Cambodia. This is only a couple years after the Vietnam War ended. The Shah flees Iran into exile, and he'll go to the United States seeking medical treatment, although he will die shortly after. You have Carter's 1979 State of the Union address. Deng Xiaoping, the leader of Communist China, following the death of Mao earlier in the decade, visits the United States. The Ayatollah Khomeini takes control of Iran. The revolutionary forces loyal to the Ayatollah take full control after the collapse of the Bakhtar government. You have the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance expires without renewal. So this is the Sino-Soviet split. It happens in 1979, and this happened just before the Sino-Vietnamese War. So Vietnam was friends with the Soviet Union, and now China, who used to have been friends with the Soviet Union, are now invading Vietnam, and they'll invade North Vietnam. Of course, that war only lasts a few months, or 1 month. See, China and USA establishes embassies during the Sino-Vietnamese War. You have the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident begins on March 28th, 1979. President's Commission on the accident at the 3 Mile Island. That's the Kemeny Commission. You have the SALT II Treaty, which was never ratified by the Senate. So a lot of people say, oh, the SALT II Treaty was an accomplishment for Carter. It was never ratified, so it wasn't really an accomplishment. You have Carter's Crisis of Confidence speech that he gives in July of 1979. The Kemeny Commission report is published. You have the Greensboro Massacre, a deadly confrontation that occurred in Greensboro, North Carolina, when members of the KKK and National Socialist Party of America, the NSPA, shot and killed 5 demonstrators in a Death to the Klan march organized by the Communist Workers' Party. Starting in November of 1979, the Iranian hostage crisis begins. You have Reagan's candidacy announced. So this is going to be the start of the Reagan campaign. The USSR invades Afghanistan, beginning the Soviet-Afghan War. You have Carter's 1980 State of the Union address, Carter's speech on boycotting the Olympic Games in protest of the Soviet Union. And then you have Operation Eagle Claw, which ends in disaster. And this operation was to rescue the hostages in Iran. It fails as 2 of the helicopters, or one helicopter crashed into a plane or something like that on the ground. And then, so we have Carter, he gives his address to the nation about that operation. We have Reagan's acceptance speech at the 1980 Republican National Convention. We have a couple campaign speeches of Reagan at Neshoba, and then this is Liberty State Park. Anderson versus Reagan, the first 1980 presidential debate. This is a third-party candidate. He will not be a serious candidate. It's just going to be pretty much Reagan and Carter running against each other. So you have the second presidential debate, which included Carter. Reagan gives an address. What does America want? You have a campaign ad. The time is now. You have Reagan's Vision for America speech that he gives that you can watch. The election of Reagan. Reagan beats Jimmy Carter. Reagan's 1980 victory speech. Carter's farewell address. And then Carter's final State of the Union address, which he does not give in person. He sends it as a written report to Congress. Now we go into the Reagan years. Let's Make America Great Again, 1981 and 1989. So this section is called Let's Make America Great Again. Reagan's presidency marked a decisive conservative turn, blending free market economics, assertive nationalism, and renewed Cold War confrontation. Reaganomics emphasized tax cuts, deregulation, and reduced social spending, while his firing of striking air traffic controllers signaled a dramatic shift in federal labor policy. Abroad, Reagan framed the Soviet Union as an evil empire, dramatically escalating rhetoric and military spending through initiatives such as the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars. Yet in his second term, confrontation gave way to negotiation as Reagan worked with Mikhail Gorbachev through arms reduction summits, visited Moscow, and helped bring the Cold War to a negotiated end, reshaping the global order and redefining American power. At Reagan's first inaugural address that you can watch. At Reagan's address to the nation on the economy, so he's going to be promoting his Reaganomics idea. Reagan's first address on the program for economic recovery, this he gives to Congress. You have Reagan's speech that he gave just before his shooting at the AFL, let's see, speech at the National Conference of the AFL-CIO. Then we have Reagan shot and recovers from March 30th to April 11th, so about 2 weeks. And you can't watch this video on the timeline because it is age restricted, but you can watch it on our YouTube channel if you're signed up. Reagan's address on economic recovery, so he's going to continue be advocating for Reaganomics. Then you have the Economic Recovery Act of 1981. So we have this speech that he gave when he signed it. Reagan's intention to nominate Sandra Day O'Connor to the Supreme Court of the United States. Reagan gives remarks on the air traffic controllers strike. He will nominate the first woman on the Supreme Court. The Military Cooperation with Civilian Law Enforcement Agencies Act. Let's see. Clarified how the U.S. military could legally assist civilian law enforcement without violating the Posse Comitatus Act, and authorized the use of military equipment, facilities, training, intelligence sharing, and logistical support, particularly in areas such as counter-drug operations and national security, while still prohibiting direct military involvement in arrests or routine policing. The act marked a significant step in expanding military law enforcement cooperation during the Cold War and war on drugs, increasing executive flexibility while formally preserving civilian control of law enforcement. Formally. We have Reagan's 1982 State of the Union address, Reagan's address to Parliament. You have a very large rally for nuclear disarmament. Plyer v. Doe, Supreme Court decision. Intelligence Identities Protection Act made it a federal crime to knowingly disclose the identities of U.S. covert intelligence agents or sources when the United States was actively concealing their roles. It was passed in response to concerns that such disclosures were undermining foreign intelligence operations and endangering personnel. The law established criminal penalties while including defenses and exceptions, such as disclosures already publicly acknowledged by the government, and has been used sparingly to protect the secrecy of covert operations. You have Reagan's address to the nation on Lebanon. So the United States is interacting with the Lebanese. We have a couple bases there, and I don't think that is the bombing yet. There will be a pretty bad bombing of the Marine Corps of Marines in Lebanon. We have Reagan's 1983 State of the Union address, Reagan's Evil Empire speech, SDI, that's the That Star Wars announced. I have to find the address. Reagan's remarks on the Social Security Amendment. This is to reform the Social Security Act. Reagan's address to the nation on the Soviet attack on Korean airliner KAL-007. Beirut, here it is, the Beirut barracks bombing. And I have to add a video of Reagan addressing that. Sony v. Universal, Supreme Court decision. Reagan's 1984 State of the Union. Reagan announcing his candidacy for re-election. You have Geraldine Ferrer's acceptance speech at the 1984 DNC. And then Mondale will give his acceptance speech on the same day for the DNC. Mondale was Carter's vice president. Reagan's acceptance speech at the 1984 RNC. You have the famous It's Morning Again ad for the Reagan campaign. Reagan versus Mondale, the first 1984 presidential debate. And then you have Bush versus Ferraro. Reagan versus Mondale. And the election of Reagan. Reagan's re-election victory speech. You have New Jersey v. TLO, another Supreme Court decision. You have Reagan's second inaugural address, which he gave indoors, similar to Trump giving his second inaugural address indoors due to inclement weather. Let's see, you have Reagan's 1985 State of the Union address. Gorbachev becomes the leader of the USSR. You have Reagan's address on deficit reduction. BK v. Rutschwicz, some Polish name. You have the Archili Loro hijacking involved 4 militants from the Palestine Liberation Front affiliated with the PLO, seizing an Italian cruise ship, the Achille Lauro, in the Mediterranean and holding passengers hostage to demand the release of Palestinian prisoners. The attack culminated in the murder of American passenger Leon Klinghoffer, shocking the U.S. public and Congress and prompting stronger anti-terrorism legislation, including the 1987 Anti-Terrorism Act. You have the infamous Challenger disaster, which happened on January 28th, and I have the address from Reagan talking about it, if you want to watch it. You have Reagan's 1986 State of the Union address. Rehnquist swears in as Chief Justice. This begins the Rehnquist Court. You have a summit in Iceland. I'm not even going to try to say that. Between Reagan and Gorbachev. And I think they're about to make a movie about that summit. They have Reagan's 1987 State of the Union address. Congress passes the Fairness in Broadcasting Act of 1987. This is so that broadcasting must have equal time for candidates running for office. I think just for the presidency. You have Reagan's Berlin speech, which he gave on June 12th, 1987. Reagan's veto message on the Fairness in Broadcasting Act of 1987. You have South Dakota v. Dole. The FCC abolished the Fairness Doctrine. The FCC abolished the Fairness Doctrine, a broadcast policy requiring television and radio stations to present opposing perspectives on controversial public issues. The decision, justified as strengthening the First Amendment protections and reflecting a more diverse media landscape, removed a long-standing content requirement that helped usher in a more openly opinionated era of broadcast news and talk radio. The Washington summit brought together U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to negotiate arms control, regional conflict issues, and human rights as a part of efforts to reduce Cold War tensions. The summit's major achievement was the signing of the INF Treaty, which eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons and marked a significant step toward U.S.-Soviet relations. You have the Anti-Terrorism Act of 1987, adopted in response to violent incidences such as the Achille Lauro hijacking and congressional findings that the Palestine Liberation Organization and related groups engaged in terrorism affecting U.S. citizens. The law declared such groups to be terrorist organizations and made it illegal to accept funds, establish offices, or otherwise operate on behalf of those organizations within the United States. Its primary use was to restrict the presence and financial activity of those entities in the United States and to provide legal tools for enforcement by the Attorney General. Hazelwood School District v. Kohlmeyer, Supreme Court decision. You have Reagan's 1988 State of the Union address. You have Hustler magazine versus Falwell. Reagan's address to the University of Moscow. So this is a pretty big step, especially during the Reagan era and during this chapter, for the president to actually be in Moscow. Morrison v. Olson Supreme Court decision. Gorbachev's speech to the UN ending the arms race. So the Cold War is effectively over by 1988, going into 1989. So that's why we have this this chapter ending with the Reagan administration. Although there will be a few more agreements, like the Malta Summit in 1989 with Bush Sr. and Gorbachev. But the actual competition ends in 1988, going into 1989. And so you have the Bush Sr. versus Dukakis, first 1988 presidential debate. You have this infamous, very, very funny Benson versus Quayle, the 1988 vice presidential debate. This is, if you know anything about, I encourage you guys to watch this debate. It's a very good debate for Benson, not so good for Quayle. He will become the vice president under Bush Sr., and he is I'm not sure how much of a political statement I can make. This is over 30 years ago. So Quayle was not the smartest cookie in the shed. Let me just say that. You have Bush versus Dukakis, second presidential debate. You have the election of Bush. He wins over Dukakis. And then you have Bush Sr.'s victory speech. Soviet Union stops jamming foreign radio. So you have, there's a Soviet term, glasnost? No, glasnost is transparency. There's another word for openness, for deregulating or reorganizing the Soviet Union. And this is part of that policy. You have the INF Treaty with the Soviet Union, and then you have Ronald Reagan's farewell address that he gave on January 11th, 1989. And then this will conclude the Cold War era. I'll be taking a break tomorrow, and then the next day, so on Tuesday, I will be covering the next chapter, which is called Chapter 24, War, End of History. This will cover the 90s, so the presidential administrations of Bush Sr. and Clinton, those 12 years. And then the next day, so Wednesday, I'll cover Chapter 25, which will be the War on Terror, and it will cover a 16-year period, including the Bush Jr. and Obama administrations. And then on Thursday will be the last day of this live stream series. Oh man, it has been a long month covering all 26 chapters. But this on Thursday we'll cover chapter 26, Crisis of Populism, from 2017 till today. This will include the first Trump term, the Biden term, and the current term that we are living in. So this is a pretty interesting next couple of days. So stay tuned for that live stream. Man, it's been one long month for me. I don't usually do live streams or video content in general, and so this has been an achievement for me, breaking out of my shell, kind of, and doing so many live streams in such a short time period, covering pretty dense history. And again, everything that I've shown you is just a work in progress. If there's anything missing, and I know there's a lot missing, I have a backlog of a couple thousand documents to add to the compendium. There are 5,000 documents currently on the compendium and events for all 26 chapters. And so this is not a dense chapter at all. This is actually pretty light when it comes to the chapters in terms of the amount of material that I include. A bunch of other chapters have hundreds and hundreds of documents. So if there's anything missing, please let me know. Any primary source documents, any events, and again, I have a backlog, so I'll be adding that. But thank you for being here this month. We have 3 more live streams this month to do, so stay tuned for that on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And if you want to know about what we're doing, this is our compendium. It's a free educational resource that anyone can access on our website, www.tarpeia.us. Tarpeia is spelled Tarpeia.us. And this is specifically chapter 23, but I encourage you to look at all the chapters of our compendium. So highlight compendium in the menu, and then you can go through. It's organized. The chapters are organized into eras. And so, like, the colonial era has 3 chapters, revolutionary has 2, founding has 3, so on and so forth, all the way until the modern era, which will include the chapter that we are currently living in. In this chapter, I'll end it in 2029 with the end of the Trump administration. So, thank you for being here if you were here, and I hope you stay tuned for Tuesday's live stream. I hope you're here. You can always ask questions in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to read them. And yeah, well, thank you. Just thank you for being here, if you were. And yeah, have a nice day. And bye-bye.